Hi, I'm Chad, and today we're going to do one of my favorite projects, and that's a square bowl. And on this one, we're going to do it with extra high corners. I think it gives it a pretty cool look, and they're a little tricky to make. It's simple, but not necessarily easy. So I'll kind of show you my approach to it, and obviously you'll want to be careful if you're trying one for the first time. A couple things I want to point out in the beginning is the grain orientation of your blank. Even though on this one you can see where the growth rings kind of follow up along the high points on two sides, but on these other two sides they cut straight across. So that provides potential weak points, but on this cherry it wasn't a problem. So I've just taken the extra precaution on this blank and I've oriented it where the growth rings are coming up and are very vertical at these high corners. So let's get this blank mounted on the lathe and get started. I've got the blank mounted on a worm drive and I've got my tailstock up for a little extra support. So I'm going to start this piece by first forming a tenon, and then I'll begin shaping the outside of the bowl starting from the bottom and pushing out and up towards the points. If the blank is well balanced and it's not vibrating the lathe too much, I like to try to get the speed up to around 700 or 800 RPM for the first part here. got the blank turned around now, and you can see our bowl beginning to form. I made the tenon. I left enough of a shoulder for it to sit securely, and I've started the rough outside shape. So next, also, I left enough room here at the top so I can flatten out the top surface before, make sure I can get some crisp corners up there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flatten the front surface. I'm going to start hollowing it out, probably come back to the outside and touch up the shape a little bit. And for this, if my lathe will do it, I'm going to try to get to about 1,000 RPM. Or not. In getting the blank back to being true on the outside from a little bit of wobble from turning it around, I ended up taking off the corners just a bit, but that's not a big deal. It basically brought them all down to the same height as the lowest one. So I'll just reshape that after the bowl is turned, and I'll show you how I do that later on in the video. As you saw, I just had a pretty nasty catch, and it, broke the tenon and knocked the piece completely out of the chuck and banged it up on the bed of the lathe a little bit. But it had actually nothing to do with it being square or anything. I was just turning a little too aggressively, and so now I'm just going to turn it around, reshape the tenon, and then go at it again with a little more finesse this time. To mount this back in the chuck, I'm going to try to just use the hole that I've created, and hopefully it'll hold it tight and we won't have two screw-ups in one video. It's mounted nice and flush, spinning true. Let's just do this for precaution. Now that I've hollowed down maybe an inch, inch and a half or so, before I start approaching the corners, I just want to stop and take a look. And I'm basically going to just work my way down maybe a half inch at a time and get the thickness as I'm going. I personally like a tapered look, so I usually go from a thin up at the point and it gradually gets thicker down into the base, so it's nice and bottom heavy and stable. So I'm going to work my way towards these corners, try to get them down to thickness, and then as I get down lower, I'll open up some more space for me to work down inside there all the way down to the bottom. And one other important thing when you're doing a square bowl like this is the positioning of your tool rest. You'll have to reach out beyond it, a good distance sometimes. It helps to have other alternative tool rest. I also have like a J-shaped one that I'll be using as I get more toward the bottom. almost done with the turning. I'm just going to reverse the piece now and shape the bottom and remove any remaining tenon. Then I'm going to sand it as it is, and then the final step will be to bring the points back into shape during the sanding process. You may have noticed on the other piece that I'd sanded away all the facets, and I plan to do that on this one as well. I've got my 4-inch sanding pad on here with 80 grit paper. So I'm going to use that just to do the bulk removal of tool marks and the vibration marks, and clean up the fuzzy edges. And then I'll probably step down to a 3-inch to kind of really get in and smooth everything out. And then we'll go over and take care of the corners. I'm over at the belt sander, and this is how I'm going to get my points back. Basically, the reason that they aren't all the same is because the blank wasn't square initially. I've got the bowl sanded to 400 grit, so it's nice and smooth now. And as you can see, I sanded off the facets on the edge. And now the last step is just to put some finish on it. And I'm gonna use Danish oil. It's super easy, makes wood look good, and you can always put something else over it later if you want to. Although I should sign it first. So here's our finished project. It turned out pretty good. The points are relatively even, and the finish feels nice. This was green wood, so it's going to be drying over the next couple weeks. And I'll also add probably 2 more coats of oil at least, and that should give it a nice soft sheen. But it's a simple project, but it's not easy. Like I said before, it's you just have to be real careful with those points. And this wasn't the best execution of it that I've ever done, between the catch and having to reconfigure my points. But you get the idea, and there are ways to recover if you screw something up along the way. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back for the next one.